Get the cream, precious metals or the crypto things. Your bars are light like the one that's on a Smith machine. But my Maxwell and I ain't speaking about the pretty.
Welcome to 3-Count Commentaries. Today's video is brought to us by a ridiculous tweet by a Alan Cheapshot. He does really good wrestling history stuff on Twitter, so that's why I follow him. But here's what he tweeted. Sasha Banks is a once-in-a-lifetime pro wrestler who was never treated like one. I think we need to stop as fans feeling like it's our job to validate wrestlers. This happens literally every single time a wrestler gets into an argument with management. People feel like they have to validate the wrestler. They have to stand on the wrestler's side. What he just said is one of the most ludicrous things I probably have heard in a long time. Sasha Banks is one of the most monetized WWE superstars ever, especially of the last 10 years. She has been everywhere. They have pushed Sasha Banks into pretty much everything. You know, first black woman to main event WrestleMania. She was pushed to be one of the first women to legitimately main event Raw. You know, main event pay-per-views, first women's Hell in a Cell match. All this kind of stuff that they've done with Sasha Banks. And people just say, well, it wasn't enough. And it's this idea that somehow things are supposed to be absolutely, positively perfect at all times. Or this person's underutilized. Or they dropped the ball. It's not just WWE, it's anywhere. It's not your job to validate the feelings of a wrestler. It is not your job to stand up and say that a wrestler is underappreciated. Or like, we don't know what that means, especially when it's absolutely false. Like, this is one of those times where it's obviously false. There have been times where people have tried to validate wrestlers, and these wrestlers barely got started. I talk a lot about Brad Maddox, the guy who got fired for going out in front of a live crowd and calling them cocky pricks. I remember one tweet, I wish I could find it, but where somebody said WWE is really going to wish they hadn't done that. That guy's going to go on the independents and be a great talent, and he's going to tear the world apart, and he's going to be on fire on the independents. How many times have people said that? And it didn't happen. You know, Shawn Spears was so over. He was such a star. How he was right there. All you had to do was, and he left and nothing. Damian Sandow, again, nothing. It's not your job as a fan to feel like you have to validate a wrestler's feelings. You know, sometimes you can just tell the truth. Sasha Banks was super monetized by WWE. One of the reasons why she has such a huge ego is because she was so monetized by WWE, because she was pushed so heavily. It's one of the reasons why she has such a big ego. It's also one of the reasons why Vince McMahon continued to give her what she wanted when she cried and whined and disappeared for months and months. It's the only reason he tolerates that stuff is because they have been using her very well. Has she won every single match? No. No, she hasn't won every single match. And I've seen people say, well, look at her WrestleMania record. I'm like, look at Shawn Michaels' WrestleMania record. Unless you want Sasha Banks to be Brock Lesnar, she's won far more than she's lost. She's super over. People are, you know, absolutely rabid for her in terms of her fan base, which was cultivated by WWE, by the way. So the crew is a WWE creation. Because without WWE, they wouldn't exist. This concept that Sasha Banks is some mistreated WWE superstar is as ridiculous. Now, here's the thing. For comparison's sake, Ric Flair came out recently and said that WWE is holding back Charlotte and Randy Orton. To which everybody looked at that statement and laughed. They rolled their eyes. They said, oh my God, I can't believe Ric Flair. Of course, he would think they're holding back Charlotte. That's his daughter. And Randy Orton, well, he kind of sees Randy Orton as a young version of him. Of course he would see, like, he loves Randy. He loves Charlotte. Of course he would think that way. But when you have these people, but people rightfully looked at Ric Flair and rolled their eyes like, yeah, right, Rick. That's what you're supposed to do whenever somebody talks about Sasha Banks. There's some legitimately underutilized wrestlers on the roster who didn't really get a chance. Cesaro was one of them, right? He got pushed here and there, but he was more of a guy who just kind of stuck in the middle, no real storylines, constantly in a tag team. He's a guy who was underutilized, I think. Shinsuke Nakamura, a guy who's underutilized in WWE right now. There are some women who are underutilized in WWE. Sasha Banks is not one of them. Sasha Banks is a once-in-a-lifetime wrestler who was never treated like one. What are we supposed to do? I mean, Sasha Banks whined and cried to get that main event spot at WrestleMania, and she got it. Despite the fact that her angle, which was poorly written, had no business being in the main event, she got it. You know, the idea that she got bumped for Ronda Rousey, which is true probably, is like a big so what. It happens pretty much to everybody. There's a time and a place for everything. It seems pretty ridiculous to me that fans feel like it's their job to validate a wrestler's feelings. Now, in general, this has become a problem because wrestling fans feel like they almost always have to side with the talent. They feel like they have to, that, you know, the talent is some oppressed, put upon piece of the business, and it's our job to support the talent and to make the talent feel welcome and to make the talent happy and everything. And it's like, that's not my job. It's not my job to hold up a wrestler's ego. That's not my job, right? Because not only is this statement untrue, but it puts a lot of responsibility on me as a fan to look at that and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. Sasha Banks, you're so great. You're so awesome. How could WWE not have you beat Roman Reigns for the title? How could we not, you know, validate all of the ridiculous things that Sasha Banks has said over the last couple of years? Reminder of the things Sasha Banks has said. She's gone on television, you know, the Broken Skull sessions, and says that she deserves to eat at the same table as Vince McMahon because she's on his level. I understand that as far as, you know, being a business person. You're in business, he's in business. You have to take care of yourself. I agree with that. But then she goes on in interviews and says she deserves the same amount of time as Roman Reigns on TV. It's ridiculous. You know, like, Roman is a draw. You're not a draw. You know, at least not as much of a draw as Roman. You're a big enough star that the network wanted you there. You're a big enough star that people care about what you do. But you don't move the needle as much as Roman moves the needle. And that's where that delusion sets in. It's not my job to make a wrestler feel like everything that they say and do, every argument, I need to be on their side. Again, there are some wrestlers who are underutilized, who are fucked over, who are, you know, mistreated. But a lot of those wrestlers aren't the biggest mainstream stars of either company. It's usually the guys who've been there for a long time, who never get a second look, you know? And it's more fair to say it's those guys, the Cesaros of the business, who are underutilized, underlooked at, you know? Underput. Yeah, sure, he got a main event pay-per-view, but he was never going to main event WrestleMania. He was never going to be considered to win the Royal Rumble match. Oh, Sasha Banks was going to win the Royal Rumble, but she got bumped for Ronda Rousey. Okay. Ronda Rousey's a bigger star than she is. Oh, that doesn't negate the fact that Sasha Banks is a pretty big star. It just means that somebody is a bigger star. And if she can't handle that somebody's a bigger star than she is, then that's just too bad. That's just too damn bad. And plus, they're probably paying Ronda a lot more money, you know? And it's simple business. If you're going to pay Ronda Rousey all this money, you're going to get the most out of it. Even if the crowd doesn't seem to like her that much, even her performances aren't that great, which I both agree with. Her performances are not great. Crowd seems to be very lukewarm on her. It probably would be better with Sasha Banks in that position right now. But she's not in that position right now. And most everybody has had to sit back and watch people who not as over and not as talented carry the ball. Sometimes you get the ability to bitch and moan and complain and throw a fit and do all that kind of stuff. To be the Shawn Michaels, who I know I'm better than them. I'm going to go out there and show them that I'm better than them. which is what you're supposed to do. That's how you do it. You know, you go out there and you show why you should be in that spot and not the other person. Sasha Banks, by not going out there and proving that she's a much better performer than Ronda Rousey, but instead politicking, belly aching, rolling around on the floor or what else, is not helping. And then these fans who feel like it's their job to validate a wrestler's feelings all the time. Oh yes, you're right. You are mistreated. You're not as big as you could be such a bigger star if they only had done this. No, you're not helping. You're letting wrestlers be spoiled brats. You know? No. They're in a business. They're adults. You win some, you lose some. Sometimes you get looked over. Sometimes you get a look when you don't need it. Sometimes you get a push and you don't deserve it. But sometimes you get held down and you don't deserve that either. It's part of life. This idea that she's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation talent. It's like, oh yeah, guy who barely watches WWE, you know, who talks more about AEW and New Japan than WWE. How ridiculous does it have to be? When they had a great match in Brooklyn, they constantly talk about the match with Bayley in Brooklyn. They had the entire feud. They gave Sasha Banks so much just in 2020. She was on every single show, main eventing. She was even main eventing on NXT. This idea that they have not treated Sasha Banks like a big star is ridiculous. 99% of the times that these people have this conversation, it's ridiculous. It's false. It's not your job as a wrestling fan to validate the feelings of a wrestler, regardless of how ridiculous those feelings are. Sometimes you are going to legitimately agree with a wrestler that they are underutilized, that they were mistreated, and I'm okay with that. But then there's other times where everybody sees that it's false, but you feel like you need to say it anyway, and it's ridiculous. And it doesn't help, because it doesn't keep the wrestler in perspective. It puts their ego out of control, and it only blows up in their face in the long term. Look at CM Punk.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort, so question as if you